I want to go for any, very brief thoughts on the arc of the day's conversation. If anyone just has, thoughts or, it can be in the form of a question or a statement. Anyone? All right. I know some of you have to go, but okay, fantastic, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Bill Strouse with a company called Future Metrics and also a partner in a company called Main Energy Systems. Just a short comment. It has to do with energy. A lot of the conversation is around electricity, but electricity is 1/3 of the energy demand in the United States. Another third is transportation, but the other third is heat. And for some reason, heat gets sort of like forgotten in a lot of the conversation. So I just want to remind everybody that thermal is an important piece of the story. How we heat our homes, how we make heat and process in industry typically requires combustion of some kind. It's not electricity. So we need to pay attention to that, and I just want to bring that out as a point. It's 1/3 of the demand in the United States. In New England, it's actually more than that. In some states, it's almost 40%. Household energy use, by the way, 85% is thermal. So it's an important component in the renewable energy space that I think we need to pay attention to, particularly in New England, where we all use heating oil, or a lot of people do. And in states like Maine, where I'm from, only 5% of homes have natural gas. It's a rural, low-density state with no natural gas infrastructure. We're heavily dependent on heating oil. And it's billions of dollars a year that get exported out of that state because of that. And so one of my companies is working hard to fix that in the state of Maine and across New England. In fact, we just sold a bunch of equipment to the Northwest Territories. Anywhere it's cold, we pay attention. I think my theory is 2/3 of the country isn't that cold, so policymakers don't think about heat very much. Up here in the
What's
north.
the name of the company?
Main Energy Systems.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Anyone else for a quick comment or question? Over here.
Hi there. One of the things that I've noticed today is a theme that I think started with some of the off-the-cuff discussion this morning, and that's about risk and the willingness to take risk. And you picked up on it here. Batting averages, everyone talks about that. But be interested in this panel's perception. How do we get to a place where we are willing to take more risks? We have utilities willing to take more risks because, again, they are in a sort of partnership with regulators and government. We have investors willing to take more risks.
All right, let's take one last thought if anyone has one. If not, we will go straight to our panel then. So from my right, Michael Terrell of Google, and we have Amy Harder of the National Journal, Stephen Munro of Bloomberg News, Energy Finance, and of course, Peter. I am just going to keep this very loose and short. We're reaching the end of the day, and we're slightly behind schedule, but not much. So, this is not a question or anything, but I'll make just one statement, which is that I live in Brooklyn, and I saw Sandy. Luckily, I didn't lose power. And then I also covered Katrina. So I saw two different levels of devastation, but also very different circumstances. New Orleans doesn't have the financial capital that New York does. And I know, Amy, you had talked a little bit about, how people do and don't want to address climate change. That was just something that came to mind. You don't have to address it, but why don't we just have your thoughts in any order on the arc of the day and what we've stepped away from this with?
I think the comment about risk is great in that context. I think the more we see this extreme weather, whether or not scientists can conclusively say it's caused by climate change or exacerbated by climate change, I think that's where the science is going and it's where it's headed. So I think the more we have to reactively pay for these extreme weather disasters, that will increase the risks companies are willing to take up front, both companies and the government. But I think unfortunately it's going to take more of this extreme weather to get us there.
Yeah.
I'll offer a counter view to keep
Please.
things interesting. First of all,
Michael.
everybody, thanks for sticking around on a beautiful Friday afternoon in the summertime. I'm not convinced that more storms are going to spur a whole lot of action. There's actually been some interesting polling done by a group called the Breakthrough Institute that shows when people face more storm activity, they go out and buy an SUV. So I just am not convinced. I think we're in a tough economy right now. It's American families have a lot on their minds and on their plates. But what excites me are the incredible opportunities for growth in clean energy. And just think about for a second of the services that are provided to you in your home, the utilities, so to speak, the way you watch video, the way you talk to people and communicate on phones, the way that you, these services have been transformed over the past 10 or 20 years, several of them. So now more than half of Americans don't watch live TV. They watch video online or on demand. The way you talk to people on the phone, I mean, when I was little, we had a rotary phone. That's been completely transformed. And the one utility that goes to your home that hasn't been transformed is energy. And so I think we're on the cusp of this sort of vast transformation that's going to create unbelievable economic opportunities. And to me, that's what's exciting about this. And yes, it's also going to solve climate change. And if you project outward, we're not going to solve the climate problem by sort of making incremental change. We're going to have to make some leaps. And those leaps are very exciting. And I think they're going to deliver real benefits to consumers, but also to businesses and to the economy. And so I'm one of these folks who thinks that let's talk about the opportunities, the economic opportunities. Being here in Boston and around this incredible hotbed of entrepreneurism is exciting. And so I think that's what's going to create the opportunities. It doesn't mean we can't talk about climate. It just means that let's not hang our hat on doing this because we're solving climate change, because it delivers so many more benefits than that.
Well, Stephen, I have a question for you, but feel free to, add whatever arc you'd like. I'm curious, as a journalist as well, you're very well steeped in this world, and I don't see it covered that well in non-business spaces. Like, I don't see energy finance, which is your territory, covered that well in non-business spaces, and it makes me wonder how much, ordinary Americans, for lack of a better word, are plugged into the kinds of things you cover. So it's just a thought, but give me your perspective.
Well, I think that's true. First of all, I agree with you. And I think the reason one possible reason is a rather unfortunate one, and it is because of the historic role of government, both at the state and federal level, in alternative or clean energy to date. And what has happened, I think, to an extent, is that the general population has become instilled with the belief that clean energy funding and development is a government role. And I think that's been very unfortunate for reasons that have been spoken to many times here today. And so, as somebody who lives and works in Washington, what I guess I'd have to say about that is it's up to the people in this room and other smart people elsewhere in the country to gain access to capital and to demonstrate that these technologies are scalable and ready for prime time with private capital.
Peter, you've been threaded throughout this day. What's the journey been like for you?
Well, actually, the first thing I wanted to do was echo what Michael said at the beginning. It's been phenomenally rewarding to have all of you here today, and for this kind of a conversation and dialogue, and more than just a dialogue, but I think we're all talking about the kind of things that individuals have to do with their companies and with their business opportunities, or if they're on the public sector side, in their roles there, but also the kind of things we have to do together. The connections that happen between investors, between large companies, small companies, can really move the needle. This is such a big, there've been so many times when we've talked today about the inventiveness and innovation that takes place with new ideas, but then in this industry, how does stuff get to scale? And that's really where and scale is really big in this space. And that is not a single company activity. That is partnerships. It's complex financing. It's having policy around siting or adoption. I mean, all those pieces have to fit together to scale up. So we're all players in here. And frankly, it's also, I tend to be more optimistic than pessimistic most days, especially as long as I don't have to go down to DC too often. It's as important as it is, and eventually, it'll come along. But we're making stuff happen, around, certainly in this region, and also by helping companies who are here find markets around the world. That kind of globalism is happening more and more.
I can't remember which panelist said, some days I think that, this is the most exciting time, and sometimes it's the most, troubled time, and I'm paraphrasing here. But I obviously there are different vectors that could take us in different directions, and I think you chose a great spot for this convening because there's all these kids running around, and we don't really know what kind of world they'll live in when they're adults. There could be anything, any number of things that shape or reshape it. So I'm going to start with you, Amy. What do you see as the prime lever in your mind that you're tracking? I mean, Peter laid out, investment, government, et cetera. Is there one prime lever, or is it more of an ecosystem of levers? And if so, how do ecosystems are dynamic and complex, and there's a lot of unintended consequences. I'm just curious what you're keeping your eye on.
So I would say I'm by default more of a pessimist than an optimist, and I attribute that to my living in Washington, D.C. But in the last week and a half, I think the one lever that I'm going to be watching, and I've been kind of reporting on it throughout the day, in fact, is President Obama's forthcoming announcement on climate change. I think, at least from a national policy perspective, energy and climate policy has been the perpetual second fiddle in this administration. First it was healthcare, and then they ran out of time to do the cap and trade bill, and now it's been immigration. But I honestly do think the president is ready to put his weight behind it, and that will go quite far, I think, in prompting a lot of action to happen throughout the country and at various levels of government. Of course, that action will be prompted with equal political reaction from Congress, and so I think that will create a political firestorm as well. But I think that's the lever I'm going to be watching, and I think that will say a lot. I think the president's leadership on this issue is important. I think you haven't seen it except for in his rhetoric, and I think putting power behind those words means a lot. And so I think that will make me more of an optimist than a pessimist.
And Stephen, you're another Washingtonian. What are you keeping your eye on with both government and business in your scopes?
Well, as talking as a resident of the Capital Region, one thing that's interesting from my perspective is that I live in the service territory of a utility called PEPCO, Potomac Electric Power. And of course, Katrina was terrible, and the superstorm that struck New York was terrible. We've been living, though, as a result of PEPCO's, some problems with PEPCO and their maintenance, as well as things related to our tree cover, with serious power outages, extended power outages for several years now. And the point I'm arriving at is that in the PEPCO service territory, which includes all of the District of Columbia and the Maryland suburbs, those who can't afford it have installed fossil fuel-fired generators, backup generators. The reason I'm bringing this up is because we talked earlier about the effects of Superstorm, and Mayor Bloomberg has announced a hardening plan for New York City. I'm bringing this up as first of all, a lost business opportunity. In other words, all these fossil generators that are filling demand that otherwise would exist for other kinds of generation, but also looking forward as a business opportunity going forward. I'm not saying this because the mayor, controls my employer. I'd be saying it otherwise as well. The idea of hardening, environment hardening, climate change hardening, if you will, as a business opportunity is something that I'm looking at and expecting to see innovation accelerate.
It's fascinating. Michael?
Yeah, I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's actually three things, and this region has all three, which is not surprising, and one reason why it's such a great clean tech hub. It's a combination of policy, technology, and finance. First of all, on the policy side, you need some market-making policies for clean energy, and I know that Andrew this morning was was down on policy, but that's more of the policies that are picking winners and giving grants to specific companies. They're market-making policies like renewable energy standards and energy efficiency resource standards that are hugely important. And I can tell you that the $1 billion that Google's invested in clean energy are entirely because of renewable portfolio standards in the states, not because of a certain federal policy necessarily. And so policy is important. And there's sexy policies like carbon taxes. And then there are ugly babies, as Tim said, that are things like demand response policies and data access and load curtailment and energy efficiency and those sorts of things. And they can really help to drive investment. On the finance side, you need to have access to capital for entrepreneurs. We've got that here. You've got a great group of entrepreneurs and venture capital firms. It's really exciting to me to see large companies bringing in and starting to open up a presence here. 60% of the Fortune 100 companies have greenhouse gas or renewable energy goals. That hopefully will become, as we move into the future, a bigger driver of bringing in some capital from larger companies. Having Shell open up an office here is really exciting on the venture side. And then on technology, you've got to have the technology. You've got to be able to bring the costs down for these technologies. You've got to be able to create new technologies. And with the university community here, that certainly exists. So I think the combination of those three things, that's why it feels like a slog sometimes, because it's not always, it's not one single thing. The combination of all of those things can really help to accelerate progress and drive things forward.
And let me just do one follow-up. I mean, how do you, in your role at Google, see your ability to affect the other levers, you know, besides industry involvement, you know, because you know, obviously you're co-sponsoring this.
One of my best experiences I've had at Google so far, I've been there for about 6 years, is when I joined, there were maybe 2 or 3 folks working exclusively on energy and sustainability, and now there's many more than that. And we got to working on our data centers and finding clean power options for our data centers. And then sort of out of the blue in 2009, we had this $38 million wind farm investment sort of come our way. And it's what's called a tax equity investment, which is very wonky, and it's the sort of thing that Stephen writes about, but the general public doesn't read about. And
I can confirm both.
and it's very important. And because of the economic situation, the investor pool had almost completely dried up, and we were a company that had a source of capital. And so the energy sustainability team at Google managed to talk our treasury people who manage Google's cash resources into making this investment because it had a really good rate of return. And so we made the investment, and then we talked them into making another, and then another, and then another. And now the way it's set up, and I don't want to get too much into internal company stuff, but the treasury team at Google, which had nothing to do with energy or sustainability whatsoever, now has hired people to make energy investments exclusively. And they're doing it just because it makes good business sense and it delivers a good rate of return for the company. So I think those kinds of examples of just introducing people to the opportunities in the space can really help to drive progress forward, and that's why we need to be convening sessions like this and talking about solutions and opportunities and bringing people together to share knowledge.
Well, Peter, this is your chance to take us out. We will hit plus or minus the time, and everyone can go lie out in the
I'm
sun.
looking at the clock up there, and it says exactly 3 o'clock. First of all, I want to, Farai, wonderful job today moderating.
Please, this has been a
and
delight.
this panel. And Amy and Stephen, you know,
Yes.
fabulous to have your involvement. Erin had to leave, but we couldn't have done this without all of you. You know, I think the energy level, the thoughtfulness you brought to helping to dig into this conversation today. And Michael, it's been a fabulous partnership, and you know, between our organizations. I know we couldn't have taken this on without, you know, the collaboration and the back and forth. So great to do it. And I'll let you wrap up. But I wanted to say one other thing to everyone here. This is like so core to our mission, which is all about growing the clean energy cluster of New England, and it doesn't work without engaging in the details of, you know, what are the challenges, what can we do for new solutions, how do we make those connections, and whether it's through formats like this or other smaller convenings or roundtables or mentor matching kind of activities, it's what we need to do, but we need your ideas of the other opportunities, you know, the connections you're looking for or the problems you have, or the opportunities you see that aren't being addressed, that take some kind of collective approach to it. That's what an association does. So thank you for being a part of this. And Michael, thank you also for the collaboration.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I just want to say this has been a great delight to me, and you know, I'm hoping that there will be a greater level of public attention to the issues that all of you have surfaced and to the tremendous innovation of this industry. So Peter and Michael and of course, you know, everyone who has been on every panel and everyone in the audience, thank you so much.